This is System Crash. I'm Paris Marks.
And I am Brian Merchant. This week on the show, a new player is about to take the smartphone world by storm. The AI industry is forging even deeper partnerships with the military, and the Iran-Israel conflict is already overrun with slop.
Plus, Tesla pauses production once again. AI is creating new problems for library websites. Some Danish governments are looking to get off Microsoft, and much, much more. You can support the show by heading over to patreon.com/systemcrashpod, where you can sign up to get monthly bonus episodes. Also, rate the show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Brian, how's your cell phone holding up these days? Are you thinking that you might need a new one sometime soon?
You know, I've been in the market for a new one.
Yeah, mine's a bit scuffed up.
It's just not running as well as it used to.
Yeah.
And, I've been using, Mint Mobile because I'm a big fan of celebrity phone companies. So Ryan Reynolds, I don't know if up in Canada you have this extends that far, but Ryan Reynolds has his own.
I don't believe so, which is a bit weird.
Uh-huh. Yeah, he started a phone company, and so I just whichever celebrity endorses a cell phone, that's the one I have to buy.
Well,
so I'm just on the lookout. Why? Do you have any news?
Oh man, I have some good news for you that I think you're going to be very excited for, since you are in the market for a new phone and you like using these celebrity phone companies. Get ready. I hope you're sitting down for this, because I have exactly what you want. The new Trump Mobile phone and cell phone service are coming soon, with a beautifully gold phone with the beautiful T on the back, coming straight from China right into your pocket.
Oh,
it's exactly what you want, Brian.
It's perfect. The Trump Mobile, the T1 phone here. I'm looking at it online now. It's got the American flag.
Placing your pre-order, I'm sure, as well.
This is so funny. It's so funny how shitty it is. Like, the funniest thing to me about all of Trump's little grifts is that they don't even try. Somebody spent 20 minutes on Adobe, or even maybe just AI generate, the image quality is low, the font is just the most basic shit you could possibly find.
It's very much what can we get these rubes to buy this time to make a bit more money?
And it's always been like that. It's and that, I mean, honestly, that has been his, I think the best line is about Trump's and his whole approach is Trump is a poor person's caricature of a rich person.
Right.
And he just it's steaks and golden toilets. And this is what the rich people, do. It's all gold plated and gaudy and so obviously signifying wealth that it's just an avalanche burying you.
Man, you're gonna look so cool though, walking around with your red "Make America Great Again," your gold Trump sneakers, your Trump phone. Man, you're gonna have the whole look. I'm excited for you.
It's literally just, this is the kind of shit that, that used to be sold in the B segment of a second-rate Fox show. It's Alex Jones InfoWars ad space stuff. It's just so insulting to his, but but people are probably going to buy it. It's funny that this one comes after the meme coin. The meme coin, I think at least was people are buying Bitcoins. People that one, it's nakedly opportunistic, just overflowing with corruption. This almost feels like a step back, right? Like a phone plan.
They're reaching the bottom of the well with the scam ideas. What are we going to do now? A phone service, I guess?
This one also feels like it's you actually have to manage this, or people will get angry, or you give up on it immediately. If anybody at all does it, if they order the Trump phone and it can't make phone calls, it's all but guaranteed if this thing ever ships, we're gonna see a bunch of stories.
I imagine there just must be some third-party company that is operating this, and they're basically just reskinning the service, and they're gonna handle all of that kind of stuff. Would be my guess.
Yeah, 100%. That's what it is. In fact, it's I wasn't kidding about Ryan Reynolds earlier. He very famously, started a stupid phone service company called Mint and sold it for $1 billion because it just generated the brand recognition. And what I was going to say was the first thing that I thought of when I saw the Trump thing was that, I don't know if you've heard of the Smartless podcast with Jason Bateman, Will Arnett, a bunch of Americans.
Yes, I have. Unfortunately, I have.
2 weeks ago, they're selling like a mobile service, and they're selling it as like a
Really?
way. Yeah,
This is like the new celebrity grift in the United States. Launch your own phone service.
launch your own phone. I don't even know how new it is, but there's just something about it. I don't know that they're actually making a phone, but they're doing a full wireless service.
That is wild. They were like, look at what Ryan's doing with the Mint Mobile. We just need to like get all of our podcast listeners to switch to our phone service. And like to be clear, all of these phone services are MVNOs, mobile virtual network operators. So it's like, they don't have towers and stuff. They're renting this off of one of the major companies and
Yes.
then, kind of putting their brand on it. Exactly. Yeah.
Right. They contract with Verizon or whatever. I mean, the Trump one is really special though, because they are like apparently going to manufacture. They say it's going to be made like the phone, this all gold mobile phone that it's going to be, built in America.
The Trump phone is the American version of the Fairphone. It's made in America, blah, 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 blah. Like, it's not. We all know it's coming from China. Like, let's be real.
That would be so funny if it wasn't though. If it was like if it did like turn out to like the most ethical phone that you could build in terms of like labor practices and where it was sourced was this like stupid Trump phone.
And somehow it's only $500.
The price, it's like $50 a month for the service. And who knows? It's just like, why choose Trump Mobile? I'm reading right from the website now. With our all-inclusive plans, we cover you, quote, when life happens, with coverage for like what that's they just capitalized when life happens. So when life happens is the Trump Mobile phone slogan, I guess. Like that doesn't feel very MAGA. It doesn't, at least the 47 plan or the T1 phone, you can see where that came from. But anyways, here you go. You get unlimited voice and text, international calling to 100 destinations, it says here. I don't know how they chose these 100 destinations. So you can call 100 locales outside of the United States. Oh, once you click through, it says, no, in fact, there's 200.
Oh my God. What an increase. This is incredible.
Yeah, that's already expanding. Oh, telehealth services, including virtual medical care and easy ordering and delivery for prescription medications.
Trump Health coming next. Brilliant.
Trump Health virtual medical care. Wonderful. Yeah. Can you imagine like having like your health plan is just
After my experience at Trump University, I'm dying for Trump Health. I can't wait. Literally dying.
Yeah, it's a backdoor into this. Anyways, our friends at 404 Media, they tried ordering one of these and it went about as well as you might expect. The headline to their piece is, I tried pre-ordering the Trump phone, the page failed, and it charged my credit card the wrong amount.
Well, man, when life happens, eh? Yeah.
When life happens, the Trump phone. When life happens.
Oh my.
In the middle of one of the most concentrated doses of authoritarianism that we have seen in this country in as long as I've been around, like yesterday at the time of recording.
Yeah, that'd be Tuesday, June 17th.
Yeah, we had ICE arresting a sitting New York City comptroller the week before that. Obviously, we've had National Guard called into protest. We talked about that a bit last week. The Trump administration is ignoring judicial orders, of course, and I counted after Brad Lander, who's the comptroller who was trying to get questions answered about one of his constituents who was charged by ICE and slated for deportation. He got literally arrested. Like Padilla was escorted out of the room when he tried to ask the Department of Homeland Security chief, Kristi Noem, just a question, and they like detained him and threw him down. And it was obviously a manhandling, a display of power. So they're arresting people now. I think the charges have been dropped, but it's just they're seeing how far that they can push this.
Well, maybe if Brad Lander had had a Trump phone, he would have known what to do when life happens,
Yeah. He made a direct call to Trump, and that's maybe that's how he did get the charges dropped. He was a beta tester
There we go.
of T1 Trump phones.
Isn't T1 also like the Terminator?
That's T1, right? That is how they refer to the Terminator movies. Which, hey, let's use that as a segue, right? The Skynet.
Yeah, let's do that.
AI in the military. Terminator. That's how Skynet gets born. Skynet is the military's AI system, and it decides that it doesn't want to be shut down when the military tries to turn it off, so it becomes Terminator and launches.
The difference being that Skynet would be the actual super intelligence, and what
Right.
we have is the bullshit super intelligence that's
Right.
just passing itself off as that.
T1 making slop. Yeah, like if it just, instead of launching a nuclear war, it just made a bunch of shitty images of people with six fingers launching nuclear strikes at each other
Yeah.
and blanketing them on low rent social feeds.
Yeah, basically what we have seen recently, and we have been talking about this to a certain degree on the bonus episodes and certainly on previous episodes of the show, where, we increasingly have this growing relationship between the tech industry and the military itself. And so this past week, we had a number of stories that continue to build on that relationship, which I think are really worth digging into a bit further. And the first one of those is that OpenAI has received a $200 million contract from the US Department of Defense in order to, basically sell it artificial intelligence tools. It's a 1-year contract. And I remember when just a couple of years ago, when OpenAI had prohibitions on the use of its software for military purposes. And not only was that thrown out the window, but now we have like this explicit contracting with the US military. And, clearly we know that we're entering, I think it's fair to say, a more hostile world, a world where it does seem like we're going to be in for more conflicts. And, we have seen that playing out in Russia and Ukraine, in Israel and Gaza and the wider Middle East. And certainly we'll touch on that a little bit later, what we're seeing right now. But, for me, this is a worrying story about seeing these systems that we know, there are serious flaws in, now being even further embedded into the military itself, especially at this moment.
Yeah, this story, I feel like barely got a blip with everything that's going on, but it is of a feather with stories that I think started surfacing last week about like in Officers Innovation Corps or something, where the Army or the U.S. Army Reserve has also sort of launched this program to have tech executives like in the service. And two of them were in Meta, but one was OpenAI's sort of chief product officer, in fact. And I was just like going back through this guy's feed, Kevin Wheel, he's the CPO, and he's just tweeting all of this stuff in support of the military and the state. I think it's pretty explicit now. This is Trump's flavor of the state, this very nakedly authoritarian, leaning state, or just fully authoritarian, as we discussed up top. So like to see now just like OpenAI going all in with this administration, with this sort of culture, with this formation, I think it tells you like all you need to know, like all this stuff about AI benefiting humanity and all of that. One thing I think we've said a few times on this show is like OpenAI is like a tech giant from, decades past, just on a speed run. Like how long was it actually saying that it was going to be, like, well, we're not going to work with the military. We're going to, that lasted, like Google said that for like 10 years, and then it broke down and, became a Defense Department contractor. OpenAI maybe like managed 6 months, a year, like a year and a half before it was like, oh, actually, no, we're all in. We're partnering up with Anduril.
Yeah, and when you're thinking about like, post the moment where ChatGPT took off is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, post the moment when it took off, not like, because it wasn't even a for-profit company. It was a nonprofit research org before then.
Well, it still is technically, right? In part.
Well, now it has this like insane structure where there's the nonprofit that like technically has control over a for-profit company that's like the for-profit company is all of OpenAI, but it's nestled inside this like illusory husk of a nonprofit that's just like an ambient sort of like mist around it that's supposed to be able to tell it what to do, but really can't.
In practice, not at all. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, these are all these things that are going on right now, right? Like, it's worth noting also that, like, OpenAI is, like, desperately trying to get out of that, trying to get out of its contract with Microsoft, where it's trying to renegotiate the terms of this a big investment that Microsoft gave it. And so, like, one of the ways that it's looking to do that is by just, like, partnering up with this, horrible authoritarian state.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point, right? And just to pick up on what you were saying there on a couple of those points, the Defense Department says very clearly that these AI tools are not just going to be like, for the office people in the Pentagon who are, kind of like doing their paperwork and things like that. On the Defense Department website, it says, quote, under this award, the performer, meaning OpenAI, will develop prototype frontier AI capabilities to address critical national security challenges in both warfighting and enterprise domains. So, the goal is also to use this technology in these increasing conflicts that the Defense Department is, involved in different ways, not always so directly, but still participating there. And then, I think that story that you were talking about, these executives being brought into the Army as lieutenant colonels as part of this new program called Detachment 201, which is a reference to something in HTTP coding, that really stands out to me because we have been talking for a little while, particularly on the bonus episodes, about, as I was saying earlier, this growing relationship between tech and the military, but in particular, how the tech industry is really trying to remake military procurement and to make sure that, these new tech companies, these new, defense tech companies are sidelining the old military industrial complex, the Lockheeds, the Boeings, the Northrop Grummons, in favor of the SpaceXs, the Palantirs, the Andurils, those sorts of companies. Obviously, increasingly Meta, OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, those ones too, right? They're just not, the ones that are like explicitly like their whole project is being aerospace and defense contractors in the way that, Palantir and Anduril are and things like that. But basically, what I'm seeing here in bringing these people into the military is them moving much more explicitly into these roles where they can try to carry out that major change in the way that the Pentagon, the way that the Army, the way that different parts of the military operate, so that they are increasingly buying from or even thinking like these people in the tech industry, right, are trying to adopt that mindset, which is going to be very beneficial to these companies that are trying to move in and trying to, basically get control of hundreds of billions of dollars of military spending that they want to kind of pad their bottom lines.
Yeah, this one contract for $200 million is pretty small potatoes compared to what, OpenAI is going to need to generate to justify its investments and its compute and talent and energy usage and the expansion of its services. And just given the scale of investment that it's received, like these investors are going to need to see like a huge return, not just a little one. But I think you're right. I think that that's what they need to do by getting their foot in the door, and then trying to oust some of these other extant players. And as you were saying, like the old guard has a potential to sort of be replaced by these sort of new, especially since a lot of this is like relationship based. It's contract, it's procurement. The winds have clearly shifted, and a lot of these sort of Silicon Valley flavored guys are now in vogue and are, buddies with a lot of the sort of inner circle of Trump. It is interesting to look at the makeup of the new 4 Army, like the reserve lieutenant colonels who like are on board with this, because I think it's telling. So you have Shyam Sankar, who's the chief technology officer for Palantir. Andrew Bosworth, people might recognize that name, if like they call him Boz. He's the CTO of Meta. Probably sort of like the biggest deal of all these guys is him coming from Meta, which is, was historically, a pretty middle down the road. Facebook is just trying to please all parties here. But now, as we've discussed on this show, Zuckerberg and the executive leadership has taken this more openly sort of right-leaning tack. And this is another sort of shot across the bow there.
I think I would cut in here before you get to the final two, just to say on Shyam Sankar, the chief technology officer for Palantir, who is, one of these people being brought in. I think it's worth noting that he is also the author of that paper, The Defense Reformation, right? That was published in October, that made this explicit case to transform not just military procurement in order to get more from these companies, but also to really change the culture within Silicon Valley to be one that wants to work much more with the military, is thinking about national security and these sorts of things. So I think having him in there too is, very notable and very important in showing not just the direction of the military, but also, the push for where Silicon Valley is potentially going. Remember when Meta signed that agreement just last month with Anduril, and they were talking about how there was this big shift within Meta and how, they were seeing these issues, right? I think it's part of this broader transformation where these people are adopting these national security narratives. Obviously, we've seen them adopt these, narratives that the American tech industry needs to be strong to fight back against China and all this kind of stuff. Like, I think this is all aligned, and he's a really notable one to be in there, but continue with the other two.
Oh, no, 100% but yeah, he's the one that you would 100% expect to be in there, like leading an initiative like this.
Totally.
And that's, I mean, it's a reflection of the amount of sort of sway or power that, that he's included in there, that it's Palantir. I mean, the third one is, OpenAI, and the fourth one is the one that's out of left field there. It's Bob McGrew, who, used to be a higher up at OpenAI, but he left with Mira Murati, former OpenAI CTO.
Yeah, who was supposed to take over when Sam Altman was sidelined, and then things went a little awry there.
Yeah, you mean Mira Murati? She was supposed to take over.
Yeah, exactly. She was supposed to be the replacement CEO. Yeah,
she was the interim CEO for like a week or something.
Right, but she was supposed to like take over from Altman, and the stories we have is she was working behind the scenes with the board and stuff, and then when things went sideways, it was like, oh, I can't be this person anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she was like, she played it almost as savvy as Sam Altman, because she, like, I feel like, suffered.
Oh, absolutely.
And she could leave when she wanted to leave. She's another crafty player in there. Yeah, you can read some of these accounts in Karen Howe's book, Empire of AI, has a great depiction. And I think there was like the excerpt in the Wall Street Journal from the Optimist book that has some of that in there. Anyways, it's a very different vibe, is even too limiting, but sort of foot forward for Silicon Valley here. Like, we have a literal sort of like officer corps for tech executives. This is another story that I do kind of feel like just like blew by in the wind, but it's like, wait, what? Like, like they're OpenAI and Meta and Palantir all have like lieutenant colonels now in the army as this like symbolic gesture of, what they think is important, where they're going to sort of invest their time with this nakedly war-making administration. We'll get to it in a second, because they're making this announcement at the same time that, like, we know Israel is attacking Iran, and every day I feel like we get more details about how involved the U.S. really was, supplying intelligence and working behind the scenes to help green light these attacks, and providing the kind of intelligence that in the very near future these companies will be helping to collect and disseminate. And so I think that's just like fuels your point that like this sort of changing of the guard, or this expansion of the blob, this one that they see as necessary. The Pentagon budget is nearly $1 trillion. It's like $900 billion. And so if there's anywhere that they can make up the deficits that they're running with their consumer products, or getting a huge piece of the pie, it's here.
Yeah, and just to pick up on that, like, literally the announcement about these people being brought into the army was the same day, June 13th, that Israel, began attacking Iran again. And of course, we have seen for several days the consequences and the escalation of that. But like, I don't know, it just seems striking to me that like literally the same day the tech industry is forging this partnership, we're having Israel, and we don't know exactly, because there have been so many different and conflicting statements, like the degree to which the United States was involved and knew about this ahead of time. Yeah, I don't know. It really stands out on my end.
I think that's a great point. I mean, because it also is another thing that needs to be underlined, in that, like, I think 10 years ago, just from like a public relations standpoint, like that would be unthinkable. Like, a mainstream aspiring sort of tech giant would not send one of their highest level executives sort of into like a militarized political environment like this, and sort of basically co-sign it and just say like, sort of like, yeah, like we think that this is important. Just to read a quick line from this release, it's not even like, oh, we're going to try to make, the U.S. safer. It's not even about patriotism or any of the old canards that, you might have expected from like a more sort of workshopped or like middle of the road, symbolic gesture. But reading from the Army's release, Department 201 is an effort to recruit senior tech executives to serve part-time in the Army Reserve as senior advisors. In this role, they will work on targeted projects to help guide rapid and scalable tech solutions to complex problems. By bringing private sector know-how into uniform, Detachment 201 is supercharging efforts like the Army Transformation Initiative, which aims to make the force leaner, smarter, and more lethal. More lethal. Like, so this is Pete Hegseth type language here. You're explicitly helping us to build and streamline the killing machine, to help construct a more innovative empire and one that's posed to do violence. And again, as you said, at the same day that we're sort of experiencing this new sort of theater opening up where Israel's going after Iran, and I don't, the tech companies and their lieutenants probably didn't know the extent to which that the US was working with Israel, but they're willing to go into this environment. They know what Trump is capable of, and they're happy to just sort of just say, okay, this is where we're at now. Like, we're pro-military, even if that military is causing like mass death and destruction.
Well, and they also know what Israel is up to, right? And,
Yeah,
we have
exactly.
been talking about, how workers at not a number of these companies, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, have been protesting against how they have been allowing their cloud services and other services to be used by the Israeli government and the Israeli military during this time when it's carrying out a genocide in Gaza. And of course, that hasn't
In
ended.
service of a genocide, these
Yeah.
tools, yeah. I mean, at this point, the tech companies have just stopped talking about that, other than just trying to get the occasional new contract, because it's just like such clearly losing ground and moral footing. Like, as we speak, like, it seems like every other day the IDF is mowing down people seeking humanitarian aid in Gaza, and it's just like, I don't think there's any serious counter arguments at this point that what's happening in Gaza is just a full scale genocide that's facilitated in part by the technologies provided by American tech companies. And that's like you said, like, the protests were like so swiftly and fully silenced by executive leadership. It was an early sign, or a sign that that something like this was coming, that like the Silicon Valley is just forging a deep and totally uncritical alliance with the defense apparatus, with the state, with the military. And this is the future. And I think the question is, like, who's going to win the most of these contracts? Like, is OpenAI going to be the prime beneficiary here? Is Palantir going to? A lot of it's political, a lot of it's like through connections. And I think like we've talked about before, that these kind of tools are especially ill suited for military operations in a lot of cases. I mean, generative AI is such a poor solution for anything requiring specificity, sophistication, careful target selection. It's just like the technology of the day, in a way, to sort of get AI is just this construct. This is where they benefit from AI being this sort of amorphous construct that can be summoned to do this or that, that has this immense fantastical power, that they can get into these rooms and sell military technology that, if anything, could be a liability. Like, I don't even know, what sort of tech OpenAI is claiming that it's going to sort of use to improve military operations in that $200 million contract we talked about earlier. Like, I don't even know what it is, what they're going to do.
Yeah, and like, it's not generative AI, but we had that reporting from 972 magazine over the past couple of years on the way that the Israelis were using artificial intelligence in order to justify a greater degree of lethality in Gaza, right? In order to justify hitting more targets, systems like Lavender and the Gospel, which were, basically finding all of these targets with the data that it had, so that then the Israelis could say, look, the computer is saying that there are all these targets, so of course we like have to hit them. Not to say that they wouldn't have hit them anyway, but it provides this like technological justification for this degree of, basically death that they want to carry out and have carried out, right?
It speeds it up, right? It speeds up the target selection. It muddies the waters. It deteriorates accountability. Those are all the things that I think that Lavender could do. It didn't allow them to find more bad guys. It just sort of, it created this permission structure for more targets to pass through and get the red stamp. That's what we would worry, about seeing more of going forward.
Exactly, in which we have seen with the killing of all the children and civilians in Gaza, right? And how it helped to justify this. Again, like, I don't think that they wouldn't have done it without these systems, but it provides the justification. And so maybe, we briefly get into what has been going on lately. As I was saying, on June 13th, Israel launched these attacks on Iran, saying that it was close to a nuclear weapon, and so it had to hit, and all this kind of stuff, that we've heard from Netanyahu time and again for years, for decades, to justify, this aggression with Iran. We won't be the ones who will decide whether that is accurate or not. I think if people are on my blue sky and follow me there, they'll know that what my opinions are on all of this. But basically, I think what really stood out to me before we get to the technological piece of it is that maybe not so much in the United States, but it felt like in Canada and Europe, we were reaching this moment where governments who were, resistant to overly criticizing Israel were reaching a point where that was becoming untenable. We recently had this letter from the UK, France, and Canada calling out Israel and setting conditions to allow humanitarian aid in, to stop expanding settlements in the West Bank, and basically to find a ceasefire. Almost immediately after that letter came out, Israel announced 22 new settlements in the West Bank, which resulted in sanctions against some of the ministers, the terrorist ministers in the Israeli cabinet who are settlers and who have been promoting basically this genocide and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. And, as soon as we start to see this major shift, all of a sudden, Iran is close to a nuclear weapon again. Israel is justified in carrying out these attacks that, many experts say are against international law. But you have these Western countries now all of a sudden falling back into line and saying Israel has a right to defend itself. We need to call out Iran. Iran can't get a nuclear weapon. The message is all the way back on track to supporting Israel once again. And as you were saying, these stories about Palestinians being gunned down as they're trying to seek food, and the continued killings that are happening in Palestine are once again kind of downplayed, not as central to the coverage. Western leaders are not talking about it or giving it much attention any longer. And so that is like really what has stood out most of all to me, on top of the really aggressive language toward Iran, a country of over 90 million people, that is coming from Donald Trump and, coming from Western elites more generally. And, to look at a tech angle of this, to think about Donald Trump flying away from the G7 in Canada to go back to the United States and sending out this Truth Social post about how the entirety of Tehran, this city of millions and millions of people, should be evacuated. Like, can you just imagine this happening at any other time and in any other forum, right? Like a Truth Social post to send the people of Tehran scrambling and making them worried about what could potentially be coming. It's just hard to fathom.
Yeah, it's just yet another one of those moments where it feels just like soul crushing to watch it all happen. Watch the rank opportunism of it. Obviously, I'm old enough to, remember the machinations behind the Iraq War, and it feels just like shades of that again. Netanyahu was literally, his government was up for a no confidence vote, and I think it was almost certainly the fact that they would have dissolved his government if he didn't. It was, suddenly just start bombing. It's just true, pure warmongering, and it's horrifying. And it is, to say nothing of the tech elements, which we'll get into here. It's just, and now everyone was wondering how Trump or the United States were going to react or be involved, and it just turns out that we are on board. Our government is on board. Trump's language has just gotten increasingly more sort of violent since that post. He started saying we. He started saying joining Israel and America's interests in his posts, talking about we need to do this.
And he's saying explicitly that they could kill the Ayatollah. They know where he is. They're leaving him for now, but if things don't go right, they'll just kill him. No problem, right?
Which is really horrifying. I mean, I'm pretty speechless about seeing this all again. We're talking about how OpenAI was this company that's on that speed running, evolution to becoming a sort of an immoral tech giant. We're seeing, I think, some of these many conditions are such that that we're just going from 0 to 60 on a lot of these issues that we have navigated before, and just arriving there's always been this contingent of hawks and people like Tom Cotton who are these neocons who have always wanted to go to war with Iran, but just it wasn't one of the top 10 things that I would have predicted happening within the first 6 months of the Trump administration. And now it looks like we literally just may get involved in this war if Iran doesn't back down and make some concessions. I don't know. I don't know what happens here.
Yeah, and I think Trump is making it harder for Iran to do that because of the language that he's using, right? He's not creating a reasonable off-ramp to actually make this stop or to allow Iran to like save face to a certain degree and say, okay, we've been attacked all these times. We have all these threats from the US government, but we're going to back off and, find some agreement or something like that. And I feel like maybe the one thing that is important to say is like, you don't need to be a big supporter of the theocracy in Iran or the Ayatollah or anything like that to like recognize that this is just absolutely ridiculous to be seeing this, that it is a violation of international law being led by a war criminal in Benjamin Netanyahu. Like, this is not something that we should be seeing in this moment. And maybe it's worth talking about a couple of the tech elements here. Like, we're seeing the hackers come out already. Of course, there's been talk about the hackers in Iran and whether Iran is going to deploy those. We see the Israeli hackers already hacking into Iranian banks and stole, I believe, $90 million from some Iranian crypto reserve or something like that. And I'm sure, it's Wednesday. We'll only see those things continue to escalate. But I feel like one of the big things that stood out to us in seeing some of the reporting on this is a story from 404 Media that talked about how, once again, of course, AI Slop is finding its way right in the middle of this conflict with, Israelis and Iranians generating their own kind of fake images to muddy the waters of what is actually going on. Not obviously consequential to what is going on here, but just a telling part of, how even war these days has to have AI in the middle of it, trying to shape and misinform what is actually going on here.
It seems that the primary use case for AI in these contexts has been to be used by sort of like the political parties or the authoritarians or those who wish to promote them, but to generate slop, right? Like images of conquest or images of like unrest, things that like play into sort of our instincts for what what war or violence should look like. Some of the more famous ones so far, the ones that have gotten more traction, have been these images of like F-35s that were allegedly shot down. So I think Iran has shared an image of a Israeli fighter jet that they supposedly shot down, but it's I mean, it's such a grim thing to laugh about, but like it looks huge. It looks like the Avengers airship or something that just like has smashed down. Like people are tiny compared to this thing. It just, if you look at it for more than 4 seconds, it's clearly fake. And there's images and video too that's circulating of destruction, buildings being hit by missile launches. You could just like draw a line because to a lot of like sort of the right-wing influencers were sharing images of like destruction in the downtown streets of LA that were supposed to be happening because of the unruly protesters. So you're just, it's a way to sort of inflame tensions.
It makes it easier for, different factions to just create their own reality, right? If they don't have the images or the video to support what they want to say, they'll just make it up and put it out there. And it's like, this is what we want you to feel. This is what we want to believe. It's much easier than ever for us to do that. And so here it is.
Yeah. And the thing that's unique about it, I think, I think most people, I don't even know, think that a lot of these are real, but yeah, I think it's helping to sort of create a whole new category of image where we're just a little bit less sort of credulous about all the images that we see, and just a little bit more willing to sort of impart our own existing biases onto these images at the same time. So it's giving people sort of just these vessels and these spaces to just sort of confirm their animosities and their hatreds. I do really think that it's still, even if we're not falling for it, even if people aren't sort of mistakenly taking it as truth, there's a real risk that these things just lead to further strife and anger. It's interesting that we're seeing all of this like right now briefly, and we're going to do our bonus episode about the Mountain Head, but like the entire plot of the Mountain Head is that tools that can create really good deep fakes have led to all of this sort of turmoil around the world, as no one knows what's real and what's not. And I think we're seeing What's really happening on the ground is that parties with access to these tools and large audiences can already use them as propaganda in very sort of provocative ways. And the fact that, it doesn't matter whether or not they're duped or not, it's just it gives sort of people who are already a little bit bloodthirsty a reason to sort of just stand up and pump their fists at the, what's allegedly happening. It's driving us further into sort of that abyss.
And maybe that's even one knock against it, is that's not actually how we see these tools being used, at least at the moment, right? It's like, trying to confirm a reality rather than, really fooling people about what is going on when you're saying that. You're not sure if people are really believing these images, but it helps to play into a vibe or a mood that some people might want to have. But I think that's going to be a really interesting conversation for our bonus episode. But I think probably it's a good time for us to pivot into our final stories to finish off this week's episode.
Yeah, it's time for the fight. No, I won't do it again. I was really delirious last week by the time we got to that point, but I did enjoy bellowing. I always enjoy bellowing. What can I say?
Of course you do.
I'm American. Yeah, let's do the final stories.
Sounds good. I'll start us off. Once again, Tesla is halting production of the Model Y and the Cybertruck in Austin. The company claims that this is for maintenance, but we've had, a long series of stories now about the difficulty that it's been having selling vehicles. There was a report in Electrek, formerly a very pro-Tesla blog that has kind of pivoted in recent months and years, that Tesla is actually renting out parking lot space around the United States in order to store all of these unsold vehicles that it's not, able to find people to actually buy. So again, things not great in Tesla land. Just like to keep you updated on that.
Thank you so much for always keeping us updated on that.
You're welcome.
It's what would we do without what did they call you, like a muscologist?
Yeah, that was it. Yeah,
or anti-muscologist, like a dark muscologist.
There we go. I'll have to get a hat that says just that in some Gothic lettering. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, back in AI land, we have news that AI is basically destroying online cultural heritage and library archives. And again, I wanted to raise this issue because I feel like it's another one it's not on most people's top 5 lists of concerns, but it's something that, is a really insidious, byproduct of these technologies. And quoting from 404, again, in a story called AI Scraping Bots Are Breaking Open Libraries, Archives, and Museums by Manuel Myberg. 404 reports that AI bots that scrape the internet for training data are hammering the servers of libraries, archives, museums, and galleries, and are in some cases knocking their collections offline altogether, according to a new survey published recently. This is just like one of those things where, it's not like the social issue or like with education or plagiarism, but it's just a very real architectural problem where you have these systems that are crawling the internet around the clock, trying to scoop up more and more data, and they're just bombarding a lot of times these websites that are not used to getting tons of traffic, that are just trying to serve a public good, that now have to cope with all of these AI systems that are quite destructive in a way that few would have seen coming.
Yeah, it's a terrible story. I hated reading that one. And, it just plays into my continued dislike of the generative AI moment and what it's doing to our cultural and educational institutions. And maybe somewhat related to that, there's a new article study that was published this week called Your Brain on ChatGPT that really goes into, some of the research on how people writing essays using ChatGPT or not using ChatGPT are really able to retain information, recall the types of things that are related to the work that they were supposed to be writing about. And it just serves as another example of basically how people using these tools are not actually learning, retaining information in the way that they would have in the past. And you have to wonder what the long-standing impacts of that are going to be. And I think we're going to be digging into this a bit more in a future episode, but I figure it was something to bring up since it came out in the past week.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this cognitive offloading has been a scourge that has been pointed to in numerous papers. What is the long tail effect of this? Of course, it's students are not ingesting, to borrow the tech term, information in a durable and meaningful and robust way if they're just constantly sort of imbibing the information and hitting the output button and just copy and pasting and rinse and repeat, not just for term papers, but for work, for writing emails. People are doing this for like writing speeches, and it's hard not to see how this has this vast sort of, dumbing down effect, and also, in the end, making everybody just more happy consumers of AI output and keeping the wheel turning ever more.
Well, and on that point about people, over relying on these AI tools and, maybe not picking up on what is happening here. Of course, we had, yet another example this week of our brilliant tech journalists, Kevin Roose and Casey Newton, co-hosts of the Hard Fork podcast, had a new kind of written conversation in New York Times Magazine, I believe it was, where they were basically talking about how everyone is using AI now. AI is changing everything, dismissing all of the concerns, talking about how they're using it for fact checking and so many different aspects of their lives, and rejecting the notion that the critics could have, anything reasonable to say yet again.
The way that they put it is like, you cannot criticize AI if you're in denial about how useful it is, or how, so you have to accept certain precepts about like, you can criticize that it's going to put a lot of people out of work. Like, that's fair, because that fits into this broader narrative of, AI being this world-changing technology. But there are certain criticisms that you are not allowed to have because they don't fit into that broader extended universe. Just yet again, seeing some of this drum banging from some of the highest sort of echelons in tech media is fine. Like, people love to get mad at them, and for good reason. And the thing that they don't see that frustrates me is that, like, you could not write more useful stories about the AI industry if you were the company yourself. Like, this is exact what they're doing time and time again, is carrying water for the AI industry. I don't know, if this is intentional or to cultivate sources or what, but it's time and time again, like, the criticisms that are off limits are ones that would actually sort of impair sort of the business fundamentals of what the AI companies are doing. If you're saying, oh no, they're going to steal all these jobs, well, of course that's what the AI companies want. They want to replace jobs. They want to sell labor replacement technology. But if you're saying it doesn't work well and it hallucinates too much, you got to get over that. Like, you can't say that. That doesn't. Anyways.
Well, and Kevin Roose even acknowledges that hallucinations are still a problem, but says they're not a problem for him. So it's all good, right?
Well, it's a user issue. I think it's a really pernicious thing that he's like, if you use, ChatGPT and it gets something wrong the first time, then that's on ChatGPT. But now that it's getting things wrong all the time, you, the user, are responsible for that, not the company that's producing incorrect information at a $20 a month subscription or whatever, or that your company's making you use. It is on you to do more work to recognize its limitations. Yet again, like, you could not imagine a position that more neatly dovetails with what the AI industry would want to hear. So
yeah, with tech journalists like this, who needs PR people is my view. But I think that wraps it up for System Crash this week. System Crash is hosted by Paris Marks and Brian Merchant. Production is by Robin Simon. Our theme music is Dystopia by our good friends in Yacht. Support the show on patreon.com/systemcrashpod to get a monthly bonus episode. As Brian was saying, we'll be talking about the movie Mountainhead. Thanks for listening.
bye.